Michael had always appreciated quiet mornings. The sun streamed gently through his living room window, casting warm light across the wooden floor. Birds chirped softly outside, and the occasional breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining his suburban street. For years he had enjoyed living in this neighborhood. It was peaceful, orderly, and friendly. At least that had always been the case. On this particular morning, Michael was sipping his coffee and reading a book when a loud, insistent knock at the door interrupted his calm. The knock was sharp and demanding, not the kind of polite morning greetings neighbors usually exchanged. He set down his cup carefully and walked to the door, curious about who it could be. Standing on his porch was Karen, a woman from a few houses down. She was known in the neighborhood for being strict about rules, especially those related to the Homeowners Association, or HOA. Karen had a reputation for making sure that everyone followed every minor regulation. Her hair was perfectly styled, her outfit neat and pressed, and her expression was one of urgency. Michael opened the door cautiously. "Good morning, Karen," he said, keeping his tone neutral. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Michael, I'm here because I had to call the HOA police. You're violating the neighborhood rules, and they are on their way to arrest you." Michael blinked in surprise. "HOA police arrest me? I don't understand. What rule have I broken?" Karen folded her arms and glared. "That is not your concern. They will explain everything when they arrive. You need to comply or there will be consequences." Michael raised an eyebrow. Something about her tone and the story did not feel right. Over the years, he had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were telling him that this situation was unusual, to say the least. "Karen, I'm curious," Michael said calmly. "HOA police? I've never heard of them actually making arrests. Could you explain how that works?" Karen hesitated for a moment, clearly frustrated that he wasn't immediately afraid. "They have authority to enforce neighborhood rules. They can take action against residents who do not follow the rules," she said firmly. Michael nodded slowly, keeping his face neutral. "I see. Well, I guess we will wait for them together then." He stepped aside slightly, inviting her in. Karen looked surprised at his calm reaction. Most neighbors would have panicked or argued, but Michael remained composed. As she walked in, Michael noticed her eyes dart around the living room. Perhaps she expected signs of guilt, or maybe she thought that fear would make him comply. Michael, however, was not easily intimidated. "You know, Karen," he began, "it is unusual for anyone to claim that the HOA has a police force that can arrest residents. I would like to verify this before we proceed." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "There is nothing to verify. They are coming. You should wait here." Michael smiled faintly. He knew that confronting her directly would not solve anything yet. Patience was his strongest tool. He had faced much more dangerous situations in his career, and this was just a minor disturbance in comparison. He was, after all, a U.S. Marshal, a fact that Karen did not know. As he sat back down on his chair, he reflected on the situation. It was not uncommon for some people in the neighborhood to try to intimidate others, but fabricating an entire police intervention was extreme. Michael knew he had to be careful, but also needed to handle this without unnecessary conflict. Karen sat across from him, tapping her foot anxiously. "You should not take this lightly. The HOA does not tolerate disobedience." Michael leaned forward slightly. "Karen, I respect rules, but I also respect truth. If there is a legitimate concern, I am happy to address it. But if this is a misunderstanding, then we need to clear it calmly." Her eyes narrowed even more. "There is no misunderstanding. You are in violation, and I will make sure that this is taken care of." Michael's mind raced as he considered his options. He could call the authorities immediately, but that would reveal his position as a U.S. Marshal prematurely. Instead, he chose to observe and gather information. Understanding her motivations and the nature of her claims would give him the advantage. Karen's phone rang suddenly. She answered it quickly, whispering in a hurried voice. Michael could not hear the conversation, but her expressions changed rapidly from confidence to worry. After a moment, she hung up and looked at him nervously. "They are delayed," she said quickly. "But they will be here soon. You should stay here until they arrive." Michael nodded slowly, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I understand. While we wait, perhaps you can explain which rules I have broken. It would help me prepare." Karen's frustration grew. "That is not necessary. You will see soon enough." Michael leaned back in his chair, pretending to sip his coffee. In reality, he was carefully observing Karen's behavior. He noticed small inconsistencies in her story. The nervous twitch in her hands and the way she avoided eye contact. All signs pointed to one conclusion. She had fabricated the entire scenario. Michael allowed a faint smile. The situation was unusual, yes, but not dangerous for him. His training and experience had prepared him for far worse. He decided to remain calm, patient, and ready. Hours passed slowly as Karen continued to pace nervously. Occasionally, she would glance out the window as if expecting someone to arrive. Michael used the time to think. He considered how best to handle the situation once he confirmed her intentions. It was important to resolve this peacefully but firmly. Finally, Karen spoke again. "You may think you are clever, but you will see. The HOA does not forgive violations. They will come, and you will be taken." Michael shook his head slightly, his voice calm and steady. "Karen, I appreciate your concern, but I do not think you understand the situation fully. I follow the law and respect rules, but false claims are serious. It would be best to resolve this honestly." Karen's eyes widened slightly at his words. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned forward, speaking with quiet authority. "I mean that false reports can have consequences. I have a position that allows me to handle these matters carefully. I am not threatened by HOA complaints, especially when they are fabricated." Karen's confidence faltered. For a moment, she looked uncertain. Michael realized that this was the turning point. He could handle this calmly without confrontation and ensure the truth came to light. As the morning sun climbed higher, Michael continued his observation. He noticed neighbors passing by, some stopping to watch. Karen tried to maintain her composure, but Michael could see the strain in her expression. At that moment, Michael knew exactly how he would respond. He would gather evidence, remain polite, and confront her with facts. He would make it clear that deception would not work on him. Most importantly, he would protect himself without escalating the situation unnecessarily. Karen finally sat down, exhausted from pacing. She avoided looking directly at him, clearly unsure of what to do next. Michael took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm confidence. The situation was unusual, yes, but he was prepared. In that quiet living room, Michael understood something important. People often underestimate others based on appearances. Karen had assumed fear would make him comply, but she had misjudged him completely. Experience, patience, and calm authority would always win over false intimidation. As the day moved forward, Michael remained seated reading his book, occasionally glancing at Karen. He knew that the confrontation was only beginning, but he felt no fear. He was ready for whatever came next, confident that truth and patience would guide him through the challenge. The sun continued to shine, the birds continued to sing, and Michael remained calm. The quiet suburban neighborhood had never seemed more tense, yet in his heart, he knew he was prepared. He was a U.S. Marshal, trained for situations far more dangerous than a fabricated HOA complaint. And he would handle this one just as carefully, just as successfully. After the tense morning with Karen at his door, Michael felt a quiet determination settle over him. He knew that her claims of HOA police were entirely fabricated, but he also understood the importance of uncovering the full story. Karen had tried to intimidate him, and while he had remained calm, he could not ignore the possibility that she might continue creating problems for him or other neighbors. Michael began by organizing the information he already had. He reviewed Karen's past behavior in the neighborhood. Over the years, she had a reputation for strict enforcement of rules, often exaggerating minor issues to create tension with neighbors. Michael realized that if he approached this situation carefully, he could not only protect himself but also prevent future conflicts in the community. He decided to start his investigation methodically. He opened his laptop and began searching for neighborhood records, complaints, and any reports connected to Karen. HOA meetings, past disputes, and online forums offered clues about her behavior. Each record he found showed a consistent pattern. Karen often filed complaints that lacked evidence, targeting neighbors who disagreed with her opinions or actions. Michael took notes, documenting the frequency of her false reports and the responses from other neighbors. Some neighbors had ignored her claims while others had tried to reason with her. Michael's experience as a U.S. Marshal gave him an advantage. He was trained to observe details, understand human behavior, and anticipate possible outcomes. He knew that by analyzing her past actions, he could predict her next moves. Once he gathered enough information, Michael prepared a plan. He needed to address the situation with Karen directly, but he also wanted to ensure he had support if needed. While he did not intend to escalate the matter to law enforcement, he documented everything carefully. Every conversation, every action, and every piece of evidence would be recorded in case he needed it later. Michael's first step was to speak with neighbors quietly. He visited a few nearby houses, asking about any unusual incidents or complaints from Karen. Most neighbors were hesitant at first, fearing her reactions, but Michael's calm demeanor reassured them. They shared stories of minor disputes, misunderstandings, and occasional intimidation. Some admitted that Karen had exaggerated incidents, claiming them to be serious violations. This information confirmed Michael's suspicions. Karen had a habit of using fear to manipulate situations. She believed that her strict adherence to HOA rules gave her authority over others. But in reality, her behavior often created unnecessary tension. Michael realized that addressing her directly would require both firmness and diplomacy. He needed to show her that deception would not succeed while avoiding unnecessary conflict. After gathering neighbor statements, Michael focused on Karen herself. He needed to understand why she had chosen him as a target. Over the past few years, he had always kept a low profile, avoiding unnecessary interactions. Yet Karen had singled him out. Michael considered several possibilities. Perhaps she saw him as confident and independent, someone unlikely to comply with her false claims. Or maybe she simply enjoyed asserting power over neighbors who she believed would be intimidated. Michael decided to approach this with caution. He could not confront Karen recklessly, as that might provoke a stronger reaction. Instead, he observed her from a distance, noting her daily routines, the way she interacted with others, and her body language. Every small detail could help him understand her motivations and prepare for a successful resolution. Over the next few days, Michael kept his routine, blending in as a quiet resident. He would water his garden in the morning, check the mailbox in the afternoon, and spend evenings reviewing notes and planning his approach. Karen, meanwhile, appeared to grow increasingly restless. She would occasionally glance at his house, and sometimes he caught her muttering to herself. One afternoon, Michael noticed something unusual. Karen was speaking with another neighbor in hushed tones, pointing toward his house. Although he could not hear the conversation, her gestures suggested planning or plotting. Michael decided it was time to step up his investigation. He began by documenting every interaction and behavior. He kept a small notebook noting the time, place, and description of events. He also installed security cameras outside his property, not to spy, but to ensure he had a clear record in case Karen attempted further false claims. The cameras would capture her actions objectively, providing evidence of any deceptive behavior. Michael's methodical approach paid off. Within a few days, he noticed a clear pattern. Karen often acted alone when creating false claims, but sometimes involved others indirectly by exaggerating stories or encouraging minor complaints. This observation confirmed that her goal was not personal conflict but control. She enjoyed being in a position where she could influence or intimidate neighbors. With this information, Michael prepared to address the situation. He knew confrontation was inevitable, but it needed to be carefully planned. He drafted a clear explanation of Karen's false claims, supported by evidence from neighbors and records. He also considered potential objections she might raise and planned responses that remained calm and factual. One evening, as Michael reviewed his notes, he reflected on the importance of patience. Karen had underestimated him, believing that fear or confusion would make him comply. She did not realize that experience, observation, and preparation were more powerful than intimidation. Michael felt confident that he could resolve the situation without creating unnecessary conflict. The next morning, he decided to gather additional evidence. He spoke with more neighbors, asking about minor incidents that Karen had reported. Some neighbors admitted they had felt anxious or pressured by her complaints. Michael noted these statements carefully, ensuring that he had a complete picture of her behavior. As he worked, Michael also practiced his approach to the confrontation. He planned to remain calm, polite, and firm. He would present evidence clearly, emphasizing facts rather than accusations. His goal was to show Karen that deception would not succeed, while also offering a way for her to correct her actions without embarrassment. By midday, Michael had completed a thorough investigation. He knew Karen had created a false scenario by claiming that HOA police were coming to arrest him. He had documented her history of false complaints, gathered statements from neighbors, and observed her behavior. Every step reinforced his understanding. Karen relied on intimidation, not truth, to achieve her goals. Michael prepared one final measure. He would allow Karen the opportunity to acknowledge her actions and stop creating false claims. If she refused, he was ready to take further steps, including presenting evidence to the HOA board or other authorities. But he hoped it would not come to that. As he sat in his living room, Michael reflected on the lessons from this investigation. Patience, observation, and careful planning were crucial in handling difficult people. Karen had attempted to create fear, but by remaining calm and gathering evidence, he had maintained control of the situation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood. Michael watched from his window as Karen walked past, glancing at his house. She appeared uncertain, perhaps realizing that her attempt to intimidate him had failed. Michael knew that the confrontation was approaching, but he felt ready. He had prepared thoroughly, and his approach would be calm, firm, and fair. As evening fell, Michael reviewed his notes one final time. He organized the information clearly, ready to present it if needed. He also reflected on the importance of restraint. This situation could have escalated quickly, but he had managed it through observation, preparation, and patience. Finally, Michael felt a sense of quiet confidence. The next steps were clear. He would confront Karen directly, presenting facts calmly and offering her the chance to correct her actions. If she agreed, the situation could be resolved peacefully. If she resisted, he had evidence and support to ensure fairness and accountability. Michael knew one thing for certain. Deception would not succeed, intimidation would not work, and careful planning would always guide him to the right outcome. Karen may have thought she could scare him, but she had underestimated his experience, patience, and commitment to truth. The neighborhood remained quiet as the sun set, but the tension lingered. Michael was ready for whatever came next, confident that he could handle it with calm authority. The investigation was complete, and the confrontation would soon follow. He had learned a valuable lesson, understanding human behavior, gathering evidence, and preparing carefully were the keys to resolving difficult situations. In that quiet suburban home, Michael felt prepared, calm, and ready. He was a U.S. Marshal, trained for far greater challenges, and he would handle this one with careful observation and patient strategy. Karen's false claims might have caused tension, but they would not disrupt his life or his peace of mind. The stage was set. Michael had done everything possible to understand the situation, gather evidence, and prepare for confrontation. Now it was time to face Karen, armed with knowledge, patience, and calm authority. The neighborhood might seem peaceful to outsiders, but Michael knew that the quiet moments before a confrontation were the most important. And in those moments, he remained calm, ready, and confident. Michael had spent days observing, gathering evidence, and understanding Karen's behavior. Now he knew it was time to take action. He had documented her false complaints, spoken to neighbors, and planned every step carefully. Remaining calm and composed was essential. He had faced far more dangerous situations in his career, and this was simply another challenge, one requiring patience, strategy, and careful timing. That morning, Michael prepared himself. He dressed in casual clothes that would not intimidate, yet allowed him to appear confident and composed. He reviewed his notes one last time, ensuring he remembered every detail of Karen's previous false claims, her interactions with neighbors, and her patterns of intimidation. He knew that the key to resolving this was to remain factual, polite, and firm. As he stepped outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Birds chirped gently and a soft breeze moved through the trees lining the streets. Karen's house was only a few doors down. He could see her in the yard, tending to her garden, her posture rigid as if preparing for another confrontation. Michael took a deep breath and walked toward her, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. Karen noticed him immediately. She stopped what she was doing, wiping her hands on her apron, and straightened her back. Michael, she said, her voice steady but tinged with tension. I was hoping we could resolve this quietly. The HOA complaints cannot be ignored. Michael smiled politely. Good morning, Karen. I am glad we can speak. I wanted to discuss the situation regarding your recent claims. I have taken some time to review everything carefully and would like to talk about it calmly. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly trying to maintain control. Calmly is fine, but you need to understand the seriousness of this. The HOA rules exist for everyone's protection. Ignoring them can have consequences. Michael nodded. I understand the importance of rules, Karen. I also understand that making false claims or exaggerating situations can cause unnecessary tension. That is what I want to clarify with you today. Karen hesitated. Michael could see that her confidence wavered slightly. Most neighbors would have been intimidated by her tone, but Michael's calm presence made her uncertain. She had assumed fear would work, but he remained composed, polite, and attentive. I have spoken with several neighbors and reviewed records of previous complaints. Michael continued. It appears there is a pattern of exaggeration or false claims. I would like to give you the opportunity to explain and correct any misunderstandings before taking further steps. Karen's lips pressed together. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she began to speak, her voice quieter than before. I was only trying to ensure that everyone followed the rules. Sometimes it feels like some neighbors do not take the community seriously. I only wanted to protect it. Michael listened carefully, nodding. I appreciate your intention to maintain order. That is important. But it is equally important to act truthfully. Claims that are not based on facts can create problems rather than solving them. They can create fear and misunderstanding. Karen shifted uncomfortably. She was used to commanding attention and having others react to her tone. Michael's calm approach left her without the leverage she expected. She had to rethink her strategy. Michael continued, choosing his words carefully. For example, your recent claim that HOA police would arrest me was not based on reality. I understand that you were concerned about something, but fabricating such a scenario can have serious consequences. It is important to correct it and ensure it does not happen again. Karen looked down at her hands. Michael could see she was conflicted. She wanted to maintain control, yet she also understood that her plan had failed. Michael waited patiently, allowing her the space to respond. Silence can be a powerful tool in situations like this, and he had learned it in his career. After a few moments, Karen sighed. I suppose I may have overreacted. I didn't think it would escalate like this. I only wanted to make sure rules were followed. Michael nodded, keeping his tone calm and supportive. Acknowledging that is an important step. Moving forward, it is important to act based on facts and clear communication. This will prevent unnecessary tension and help the neighborhood remain peaceful. Karen looked up at him, her eyes uncertain. And what if I make a mistake again? How can I handle situations without causing problems? Michael smiled gently. The key is to communicate clearly and verify information before taking action. Speaking directly with neighbors and addressing concerns calmly can prevent misunderstandings. Acting out of fear or anger usually worsens situations. Karen nodded slowly, absorbing his advice. Michael could sense that she was beginning to realize the impact of her actions. Her attempts to intimidate him had failed, and now she had the chance to adjust her behavior. To reinforce the point, Michael presented the evidence he had collected. I have spoken with neighbors and reviewed records of previous claims. There is a consistent pattern of exaggeration. I am sharing this not to accuse you, but to help you understand how these actions affect others. If we address this now, we can prevent future conflicts. Karen glanced at the documents, her face showing surprise. She had expected fear, not a calm, factual presentation. Michael had removed her advantage entirely. By remaining composed and logical, he had shifted control of the situation to himself without aggression. I understand, Karen admitted quietly. I didn't realize the effect of my actions. I only thought I was doing the right thing. Michael nodded. Intentions matter, but actions matter more. Ensuring that your actions are truthful and measured will help everyone. This is an opportunity to improve communication and trust in the neighborhood. Karen remained silent for a moment, reflecting. Michael gave her the space she needed. He knew that pushing too hard could provoke defensiveness, and his goal was resolution, not conflict. Finally, Karen spoke again. I will stop making false claims. I will be more careful in the future. I don't want to create problems for anyone. Michael's calm smile widened slightly. That is a positive step. I believe that this approach will benefit you, me, and the entire community. Communication and honesty are the foundation of trust. Karen nodded. There was a visible sense of relief on her face. Michael had not only addressed the immediate problem but also guided her toward understanding and improvement. This was a key lesson from his training as a U.S. Marshal. Patience, observation, and calm authority can resolve situations more effectively than confrontation. Thank you, Michael, Karen said after a pause. I will try to be better. I see now that fear and intimidation do not solve anything. Michael nodded. That is all anyone can ask. We all make mistakes, but learning from them is important. With that, Michael turned and walked back to his house. He could feel a sense of accomplishment. The confrontation had been handled without conflict, and the neighborhood's peace was restored. Karen had been given the chance to adjust her behavior, and she had accepted it. Michael knew that maintaining vigilance would be necessary, but he was confident that the immediate threat was resolved. Over the next few days, Michael observed the neighborhood quietly. Karen acted differently, engaging more calmly with neighbors and avoiding exaggerated complaints. Michael continued his routine, confident that the situation was stable. He remained friendly and approachable, setting an example of how to handle conflict with patience and composure. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Conversations that had previously been tense were now polite and relaxed. Michael's calm handling of the confrontation had a ripple effect, encouraging others to communicate more openly and respectfully. Reflecting on the events, Michael understood the importance of preparation, observation, and strategy. He had approached the situation logically, gathered evidence, and presented facts clearly. By remaining calm and professional, he had neutralized Karen's attempts at intimidation and guided her toward a more constructive approach. That evening, Michael sat in his living room, reviewing his notes one last time. He knew that situations like these could arise again, but he felt confident in his ability to handle them. Experience, patience, and careful planning were powerful tools. Karen had learned an important lesson, and the neighborhood had regained a sense of peace. Michael looked out the window at the quiet streets, the setting sun casting warm light over the houses. He felt satisfied with the outcome. Conflict had been resolved without escalation, and trust had been restored. This was a reminder that careful planning, calm authority, and observation could solve even the most unusual problems. He leaned back in his chair, sipping a cup of tea, and reflected on the day. Confrontation had not been easy, but it had been necessary. Karen had been challenged, guided, and given a chance to correct her actions. Michael had used his skills as a U.S. Marshal to manage the situation effectively, showing that calm reasoning and careful preparation could achieve results that fear and intimidation never could. In the quiet of his home, Michael felt at peace. He had faced deception, intimidation, and uncertainty, yet he had remained composed and successful. The neighborhood was safer, and the lessons learned would have lasting effects. Michael knew that truth, patience, and careful planning were the most powerful tools available, and he would continue to use them in the future. Karen's false claims had been a test, one she had failed, but with guidance she had the opportunity to improve. Michael's calm approach had prevented conflict and ensured fairness. The neighborhood could now move forward, and Michael remained ready for whatever challenges might arise next. The sun finally set, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Michael felt a sense of satisfaction and confidence. The confrontation had been handled skillfully, and the neighborhood's peace restored. He knew that patience, observation, and careful planning were key to resolving any situation, no matter how unusual or challenging it might appear. As he turned off the lights and prepared for the evening, Michael felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The confrontation was over, lessons had been learned, and the neighborhood could return to its calm routine. Michael had proven that calm authority, preparation, and careful strategy could overcome fear, deception, and intimidation, ensuring peace and fairness for everyone involved. After his calm confrontation with Karen, Michael felt a temporary sense of relief. The immediate tension had eased, and Karen had acknowledged her false claims. Yet his instincts told him that the situation was not fully resolved. People like Karen often acted from deeper motives. and he knew that understanding them completely was necessary to prevent future problems. Michael decided to continue observing carefully and uncover the real reasons behind her behavior. The next morning, Michael began his routine early. The sun was rising, casting a soft orange glow over the quiet suburban street. He walked slowly to his mailbox, greeting a few neighbors along the way. Small talk felt natural, but his mind remained focused on Karen. He had already seen her attempt to assert control through fear, but what drove her actions? Understanding this could help him manage not only his situation, but also prevent her from disturbing the peace of the neighborhood further. Michael started by reviewing Karen's past interactions more closely. He checked HOA records, neighborhood newsletters, and past complaints. Patterns began to emerge. Karen often felt the need to prove her authority. Minor disagreements or small deviations from the rules would trigger her to act decisively, often exaggerating issues to ensure compliance. What concerned Michael most was that her actions created stress for others and sometimes threatened peaceful resolution. He also recalled his conversation with neighbors. Many admitted that Karen could be persuasive and intimidating, but they rarely experienced real harm. This indicated that her power was more psychological than actual. She relied on fear to influence others, not legitimate authority. Michael realized that addressing this underlying behavior would be critical. Later that morning, Michael decided to speak directly with another neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived on the street for decades. She had witnessed Karen's interactions with multiple residents and could provide insight into her motives. "Mrs. Thompson," Michael began politely, "I am trying to understand Karen's behavior. Can you tell me if there were past incidents that might explain why she acts this way?" Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. "Oh, Michael, Karen has always wanted to feel important. She believes following rules perfectly gives her authority over everyone. When someone disagrees or ignores her, she feels threatened. That is why she exaggerates complaints and sometimes fabricates stories." Michael listened attentively, taking careful mental notes. "Do you think she will continue causing problems if not addressed directly?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "She might if she feels she can control others. But if someone shows calm authority, she often backs down. That is why she hasn't caused real harm yet. People usually fear her enough to avoid conflict." Michael nodded thoughtfully. This aligned perfectly with his own observations. Karen's behavior was rooted in a need for control, not malice. Understanding this was crucial. He could not simply stop her actions. He needed to provide a framework that allowed her to express herself without harming others. That afternoon, Michael decided to observe Karen from a discreet distance. He noticed her walking through the neighborhood, speaking with neighbors in a more restrained manner than before. Occasionally, she would glance toward his house, but her body language suggested caution rather than aggression. Michael concluded that his previous calm confrontation had influenced her behavior positively, but continued vigilance was necessary. He returned home and began planning a long-term strategy. Michael understood that people like Karen often required clear boundaries and consistent consequences to change behavior. His first step was to document every interaction meticulously, ensuring that any future actions would be based on facts rather than assumptions. Over the next few days, Michael implemented subtle measures to maintain control without confrontation. He greeted Karen politely whenever he saw her, maintaining friendly but firm communication. He also continued gathering information about neighborhood dynamics, ensuring that any potential disruptions could be addressed calmly. One evening, as Michael reviewed his notes, he noticed something unusual. Karen had been communicating with a small group of neighbors about minor issues, often exaggerating their significance. Michael realized that while her direct attempts to intimidate him had failed, she might attempt to influence others indirectly. Understanding this allowed him to anticipate her next moves. Michael decided to act proactively. He reached out to neighbors individually, discussing minor concerns and emphasizing the importance of communication and verification before taking any action. By establishing trust and clear procedures, he minimized the possibility that Karen's exaggerations would cause misunderstandings. The next day, Michael spoke with the HOA board. He presented his findings calmly, focusing on facts rather than personal opinions. He explained that while Karen had made false claims, the issue could be resolved through better communication, documentation, and adherence to established procedures. The board members listened attentively, appreciating Michael's reasoned approach. After the meeting, Michael returned home with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He had not only addressed the immediate issue, but also established structures to prevent future problems. Karen's influence would be limited, and the neighborhood would benefit from clearer communication and verification. Later that afternoon, Michael observed Karen speaking with a neighbor near her property. She seemed more restrained than before, asking questions rather than making declarations. Michael realized that her behavior was shifting, influenced by his calm authority and the presence of clear boundaries. While she still sought recognition and control, she had learned that intimidation would not work with him. Michael reflected on the lessons from this experience. Understanding human behavior was as important as responding effectively. People often acted out of fear, insecurity, or a desire for control. By observing carefully, gathering facts, and maintaining calm authority, he could manage situations without escalating conflict. That evening, Michael prepared a short summary of the events for his own records. He noted each interaction with Karen, statements from neighbors, and observations about her behavior. This documentation ensured that any future actions would be based on evidence rather than speculation. As he sat in his living room, Michael realized that this situation had reinforced an important principle. Calm authority and preparation are more powerful than intimidation or fear. Karen had tried to assert control, but his composed approach had guided her toward a more constructive path. Over the following week, Michael continued his quiet observation. Karen's behavior improved gradually. She approached minor issues with caution, verified information before reacting, and engaged neighbors politely. Michael maintained his routine, interacting with her when necessary but always remaining calm and composed. The neighborhood began to notice a change as well. Tension that had existed for weeks faded, replaced by more open communication and mutual respect. Michael's patient approach had not only resolved his conflict with Karen, but also strengthened the community. Neighbors felt empowered to communicate directly and verify information before acting, reducing the impact of false claims or exaggerations. One afternoon, Michael observed Karen approaching him cautiously. "Michael," she said, her tone neutral, "I wanted to apologize again for the previous incident. I understand now how my actions affected others. I will be more careful in the future." Michael smiled politely. "Thank you, Karen. Acknowledging this is important. Moving forward, clear communication and honesty will benefit everyone. I am confident that we can maintain a peaceful neighborhood together." Karen nodded slowly. "I will try my best." Michael knew that her commitment was sincere. While people like Karen often required ongoing guidance, her acknowledgement was a positive step. He continued to observe and interact with her politely, maintaining a balance of friendliness and firm boundaries. Over time, Michael noticed subtle improvements. Karen participated in neighborhood discussions constructively, avoided exaggerating minor issues, and engaged respectfully with neighbors. Michael's calm and methodical approach had guided her toward better behavior without confrontation or escalation. Reflecting on the entire situation, Michael understood the broader lessons. People often acted out of fear, insecurity, or a desire for control. By observing carefully, gathering evidence, and maintaining calm authority, conflicts could be resolved effectively. Patience, strategy, and clear communication were powerful tools, and he had applied them successfully in this unusual situation. As the sun set over the quiet suburban street, Michael felt a sense of satisfaction. The immediate conflict with Karen had been resolved, and long-term measures had been implemented to prevent future problems. The neighborhood could now enjoy a renewed sense of peace, and Michael remained ready to address any challenges calmly and effectively. He leaned back in his chair, sipping a cup of tea, and reflected on the experience. Karen had tested him, but he had responded with patience, observation, and strategic planning. The confrontation had led to understanding, improved communication, and stronger community trust. In the end, Michael realized that calm authority, careful observation, and consistent boundaries could transform difficult situations into opportunities for growth and understanding. Karen's false claims had been a challenge, but through careful management, he had guided her toward better behavior and ensured that the neighborhood remained peaceful and respectful. Michael's role as a U.S. Marshal had trained him for far more dangerous situations. Yet this experience reinforced the importance of observation, preparation, and calm authority in everyday life. By understanding human behavior and responding thoughtfully, he had turned a potentially tense situation into an opportunity for learning and improvement. The neighborhood, once tense and uncertain, now felt safer and more connected. Michael had not only resolved the conflict with Karen but also strengthened relationships and established procedures that would benefit the entire community. His patience and strategy had created a lasting positive impact. As night fell, Michael looked out over the quiet streets, confident in the results of his efforts. The confrontation had ended, lessons had been learned, and the neighborhood could move forward with renewed trust and understanding. Michael had successfully managed deception, intimidation, and uncertainty, demonstrating that calm authority, preparation, and careful strategy were the keys to resolving difficult situations and maintaining peace. Michael had spent weeks carefully managing the situation with Karen. Through calm observation, strategic planning, and patient confrontation, he had already addressed her false claims and guided her toward more constructive behavior. Yet he knew that restoring lasting peace in the neighborhood required consistent effort and subtle guidance. The challenge now was to ensure that trust and respect prevailed, not just between him and Karen, but among all residents. The morning was clear and bright. Michael stepped outside, enjoying the gentle warmth of the sun on his face. Birds sang in the trees, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves along the quiet street. The neighborhood had begun to feel lighter, freer from tension. Children played in front yards, neighbors chatted casually, and the air seemed calmer than it had in weeks. Michael greeted a few neighbors as he walked toward the community park. Many smiled warmly, expressing relief that conflicts had diminished. He had been careful not to appear controlling, instead allowing his calm and fair approach to influence the community naturally. People had begun to understand the importance of clear communication, verification, and patience, and Michael could see the results. Karen was outside as well, tending her small flower garden near the sidewalk. She looked up as Michael approached. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in her posture. She smiled politely, a small but genuine gesture. "Good morning, Michael," she said quietly. "Good morning, Karen," Michael replied with a nod. "It is a nice day today. I hope things are going smoothly in the neighborhood." Karen hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I have been more careful with complaints and talking to neighbors. I see how important communication is." Michael smiled. "That is excellent. Awareness and honesty make the community stronger. Everyone benefits when we work together and respect facts." Karen seemed to reflect on this, her expression thoughtful. Michael could sense that she was beginning to internalize the lessons he had provided. Patience and calm authority had encouraged her to reassess her actions without causing embarrassment or conflict. After their brief conversation, Michael continued toward the park. He wanted to ensure that positive interactions extended beyond just Karen. The neighborhood needed reinforcement of fair communication, problem-solving, and cooperation. At the park, Michael met with a small group of neighbors who had been indirectly affected by Karen's previous actions. He addressed them calmly and clearly. "I know there have been misunderstandings recently. Some complaints were exaggerated, and that created stress. I want to encourage everyone to communicate directly, verify information, and remain calm when addressing concerns. This will ensure fairness and peace for all." The neighbors listened attentively. Some nodded, acknowledging the advice. Michael continued, "We all want a strong community. That means respecting rules, respecting each other, and acting responsibly. False claims or exaggerations harm everyone. By being careful and thoughtful, we can prevent conflicts and strengthen trust." The neighbors smiled, clearly appreciating the approach. Michael realized that his calm guidance was having a ripple effect. People who had felt uncertain or intimidated were now empowered to act responsibly. Trust in the community was slowly being restored, and the foundations for lasting peace were being established. Returning home, Michael reviewed his notes and observations. He knew that maintaining long-term peace required continued vigilance. While Karen had improved, ongoing guidance and reinforcement were necessary to prevent relapses. Michael planned to continue subtle observation, ensure fair communication, and be available for conflict resolution if needed. Later that afternoon, Michael observed Karen interacting with a young neighbor, Lily. The child had accidentally knocked over a small decorative plant in Karen's garden. Previously, such a minor incident might have triggered an exaggerated complaint or confrontation. Today, Karen handled it differently. She calmly smiled, spoke gently, and helped Lily replant the flowers. Michael watched from a distance, satisfied. Karen had learned to respond constructively rather than react with fear or intimidation. His approach had guided her toward understanding the importance of patience, observation, and fair communication. The neighborhood, too, was learning that calm authority could create harmony without force or fear. The following day, Michael organized a small neighborhood gathering at the park. It was informal, a chance for neighbors to reconnect, discuss minor concerns, and build relationships. Michael acted as a facilitator, encouraging dialogue and fairness while ensuring that no one felt intimidated. Karen attended, maintaining a polite but respectful distance. She listened to others, asked questions, and offered advice in a friendly, measured way. Michael observed her behavior carefully. This time, there were no exaggerated claims, no attempts to assert control through fear, only genuine participation. During the gathering, Michael spoke briefly. "We all want a safe, peaceful, and respectful neighborhood. That means listening to each other, verifying information, and responding thoughtfully. By working together, we can prevent misunderstandings and create a stronger community. Mistakes happen, but learning from them is important. We all benefit from patience, honesty, and fairness." The neighbors applauded lightly, expressing agreement. Michael's calm and reasoned approach had once again guided the community toward constructive behavior. He had not used fear or aggression, but careful observation, preparation, and authority based on respect and truth. As the gathering ended, Michael walked back toward his home. He noticed Karen walking alongside him, a small smile on her face. "Michael," she said, "I wanted to thank you again. I understand now how my actions affected others. I will continue to be careful and act responsibly." Michael nodded. "I'm glad to hear that, Karen. Recognizing the impact of our actions is an important step. Your willingness to adjust will benefit both you and the community. Thank you for taking that step." Karen smiled and continued on her way. Michael watched her go, satisfied that the lessons had been understood. The neighborhood was safer, calmer, and more cooperative because of careful planning, calm authority, and strategic guidance. Over the next several weeks, Michael continued his routine, maintaining subtle observation and friendly communication. The neighborhood had fully returned to its peaceful rhythm. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, small conflicts were resolved calmly, and trust began to grow again. Karen, while still attentive to rules, no longer attempted intimidation or false claims. She had learned the importance of honesty, patience, and communication. Michael reflected on the experience, understanding the broader lessons. People often acted out of insecurity, a desire for control or fear. By observing behavior, gathering facts, and responding calmly and fairly, conflicts could be resolved without escalation. Patience and strategy were more effective than aggression or fear. One evening, as Michael sat on his porch, he noticed children playing in the street, neighbors chatting, and Karen tending her garden with a calm demeanor. The sense of community had returned. Michael felt a deep satisfaction knowing that the neighborhood was safe, peaceful, and fair. He understood that the situation with Karen could have escalated into conflict, but his careful planning and calm approach had guided it toward resolution. By establishing boundaries, gathering evidence, and addressing behavior constructively, he had restored trust and cooperation. Michael's experience as a U.S. Marshal had prepared him for much more dangerous situations. Yet this incident reinforced an important principle. Observation, preparation, calm authority, and fairness could resolve even tense situations without confrontation. The lessons applied not only to his professional life but to everyday interactions as well. That night, Michael reviewed his notes one final time. He recorded observations about Karen's behavior, community responses, and the successful resolution of conflicts. Documentation ensured that any future issues could be addressed with clarity and fairness. The neighborhood was quiet and calm. Michael felt proud that his approach had influenced not only Karen but the wider community. Peace had been restored, boundaries were understood, and trust was growing. As he sat back watching the sunset cast a warm glow over the street, Michael reflected on the journey. The conflict with Karen had begun with intimidation and false claims, but through careful planning, calm authority, and strategic guidance, he had turned the situation into an opportunity for growth and understanding. The neighborhood had emerged stronger and more connected. Karen had learned important lessons about honesty, patience, and respectful communication. Michael had reinforced the value of calm authority and observation. The community was safer, more cooperative, and more trusting because of his careful actions. Michael felt content, knowing that he had handled the situation effectively without escalating tension or conflict. He had protected himself, guided Karen, and strengthened the neighborhood. The lessons learned would last for years, ensuring that the community could face future challenges with calm, fairness, and understanding. As night fell, the quiet streets reflected the peace that Michael had helped restore. His work was done for now. The neighborhood could continue to thrive, supported by honesty, patience, and thoughtful communication. Michael had turned a tense and potentially disruptive situation into a lasting positive outcome, demonstrating that calm authority, preparation, and fairness were the keys to resolving conflict and maintaining peace. Michael leaned back in his chair one last time, taking a deep breath. The day was over, the neighborhood was safe, and the lessons had been learned. Peace had been restored, and the community was stronger than before. Michael knew that vigilance and fairness would always be necessary, but he was ready. Through observation, calm authority, and thoughtful action, he had created a lasting positive impact. The sun set fully, and the neighborhood fell into a peaceful quiet. Michael smiled, feeling satisfied. The challenge had been met, lessons had been learned, and harmony had returned. He had handled deception, intimidation, and uncertainty with skill and patience, proving that thoughtful action and calm authority were stronger than fear or manipulation. The neighborhood was safe, Karen had learned to act responsibly, and Michael could finally relax. Peace was restored, and the community was stronger, thanks to careful observation, strategic planning, and calm leadership. The story of the false HOA police incident would fade into memory, replaced by lessons of fairness, communication, and trust that would benefit the neighborhood for years to come.